Every human alive today carries a secret that points back to one place. Scientists say all of us began in Africa, but the evidence is stranger and more controversial than it seems. Were we truly born from one cradle of humanity, or is history hiding something we were never told? 2 million years ago, long before nations, cities, or even villages existed, the vast continent of Africa was home to a drama that would change the fate of the entire planet. For here, the first true humans took their earliest steps, and in this moment, the story of all of us truly began. Fossil evidence scattered across the Rift Valley tells us that the earliest ancestors who resembled us began appearing here long before they ever set foot anywhere else. Their bones buried in layers of earth that scientists painstakingly uncovered piece by piece, each discovery adding another clue to the riddle of our origin. These ancient beings, known as Australopithecus and later Homo habilis and Homo erectus, were not yet fully human as we define ourselves today. Yet they had something their primate cousins lacked, a spark of intelligence that pushed them beyond mere survival. They shaped crude stone tools. They learned to stand upright for longer distances, and they began to experiment with new ways of living in an unforgiving world. But the most fascinating question is this: why Africa and why them? Africa was not always a gentle cradle. It was a land of shifting climates, where forests shrank and grasslands spread, forcing creatures to adapt or die. For many primates, this change was disastrous, but for our ancestors, it was the crucible that forged resilience. Walking upright gave them the advantage to travel farther in search of food, to spot predators from a distance, and to carry what they needed in their hands, and with free hands came the ability to create. Stone flakes became knives, sharp edges cut meat from bone, and suddenly survival was not only about strength but about innovation. Slowly, generation by generation, the creatures of Africa were changing, developing larger brains, stronger social bonds, and the ability to imagine what did not yet exist. Yet we must ask ourselves, how certain are we of this story? Did humanity truly emerge from a single place, or were there other pockets of evolution elsewhere that left no trace? Skeptics have pointed to mysterious fossils in Asia and Europe, suggesting perhaps the picture is not as clear as the textbooks claim. But still, the overwhelming weight of genetic evidence points us back to Africa, back to a time when our species was not yet alone, back to when we shared the Earth with multiple human cousins. What made Africa so unique is not only its environment but also its diversity of habitats. Rivers, lakes, mountains, deserts, all acting as nature's laboratory, testing and shaping those early beings until eventually one lineage emerged with the potential to dominate the globe. This lineage would one day be called Homo Sapiens, but before their rise, countless other human forms walked these same lands, each with their own struggle for survival, each leaving behind fragments of skulls, stone tools, and mysteries. When we look at the cracked bones of Homo habilis, we are looking at some of the first toolmakers in history, creatures that turned rocks into weapons, forever altering the balance of power between predator and prey. When we examine Homo erectus, we see wanderers who left Africa nearly 2 million years ago, reaching Asia and Europe, adapting to new climates and landscapes, spreading humanity far beyond its birthplace. But here lies the heart of the mystery. If multiple kinds of humans existed, why are we the only ones left? Why did Homo sapiens succeed where all the rest vanished into extinction? The answer begins here in Africa, in the landscapes where survival meant constant adaptation, where climate shifts tested endurance, and where innovation was the difference between life and death. This is the beginning of our story, the dawn of humanity, the place where apes became something more, but it is only the first piece of the puzzle. For if Africa was the cradle, then the real question is, how did its children conquer the world? And that I will reveal in the next part. Around 300,000 years ago in Africa, a new kind of human appeared, one whose brain was not only larger but wired differently, one capable of imagination, strategy, and cooperation at a level that no other species on Earth had ever achieved. And these were the beings who would later be called Homo sapiens, our direct ancestors. Fossil remains found in places like Jebel Irhoud in Morocco tell us that these early sapiens already carried the traits of modern humanity: a rounded skull, lighter build, and most importantly, a mind capable of abstraction. Unlike their cousins, they did not merely adapt to the harsh African landscapes, They reshaped their survival through thought and planning. Archaeological evidence reveals the creation of tools far more sophisticated than those of their predecessors. Finely shaped blades, bone implements, and even ornaments that suggest an early sense of identity and culture. This was not just survival. This was the birth of creativity. Yet to understand why sapiens rose above all others, we must ask a difficult question. What did they have that Neanderthals, Denisovans, and other human cousins lacked? The answer lies partly in language, partly in cooperation, and partly in the ability to imagine futures not yet real. Early sapiens formed groups larger than families, bound not only by blood but by shared stories, symbols, and rituals. Evidence from sites like Blombos Cave in South Africa shows that they carved abstract patterns on ochre and created beads from shells more than 70,000 years ago. Symbols that carried meaning beyond mere decoration. This ability to symbolize transformed how they lived. Now they could create shared myths, binding strangers into communities, coordinating hunts, and passing knowledge across generations. While Neanderthals were skilled hunters with powerful bodies, their groups remained small and isolated, their communication limited.
Their innovations slower to spread. Sapiens, however, formed vast networks that stretched across the continent, exchanging ideas, tools, and genes. This network became their invisible weapon, a force that allowed them to outlast famine, to innovate under pressure, and to prepare for challenges ahead. By 200,000 years ago, sapiens were spreading across Africa, thriving in deserts, forests, and savannas, showing a flexibility unmatched by any other human species. Genetic studies confirm that every person alive today carries roots that trace back to these African populations, meaning no matter where you live, your ancestors once walked those ancient plains. But the story of their rise is not complete without the Great Leap, the moment they decided to leave Africa and journey into the unknown. Archaeological and genetic evidence suggests that around 60,000 to 70,000 years ago, a wave of sapiens began moving outward, crossing into the Middle East and eventually reaching Asia, Europe, and beyond. This migration was not a random drift, but a daring step into territories already inhabited by other humans, like the Neanderthals. Why did they leave? Climate shifts may have pushed them to seek new lands. Population growth may have forced expansion, or perhaps it was their restless curiosity, the same drive that would one day carry their descendants across oceans and into space. Whatever the reason, this journey marked the beginning of a global conquest. And yet the question remains, what happened when these sapiens, fresh from Africa, came face to face with their powerful cousins, the Neanderthals, who had ruled Europe for hundreds of thousands of years? Was it war, was it interbreeding, was it coexistence, or was it something more mysterious? That answer I will reveal in the next part. About 60,000 years ago, as Homo sapiens spread beyond Africa, they met another kind of human already thriving in Europe and Western Asia, the Neanderthals. These were not mindless cavemen, but skilled survivors, strong bodies built for the Ice Age, hunters who knew the land, toolmakers who even buried their dead with care. For thousands of years, the two species overlapped. Evidence shows they lived side by side, sometimes competing, sometimes mixing. DNA confirms what fossils could not. They interbred, and traces of Neanderthal genes still exist in all non-African people alive today. Yet, while sapiens expanded, Neanderthals dwindled. Their groups were small, isolated, and slow to adapt, while sapiens formed vast networks, spread innovations rapidly, and survived climate shifts with resilience. Some believe conflict sealed the fate of Neanderthals. Others point to famine, disease, or sheer numbers. By 40,000 years ago, their voices had gone silent, leaving sapiens as the last humans standing. But did they truly vanish? Not entirely. They live on in our DNA, in our story, in the faint echoes left on cave walls. Their extinction is also our inheritance, a reminder that humanity's triumph is always balanced with loss. And the real question remains, if they could disappear, what does that say about our own future? Long before Homo sapiens began their relentless spread across continents, Neanderthals had already carved a life for themselves in Europe and Western Asia. These humans, powerful and resilient, thrived in landscapes of ice and forest, adapting to climates that would have destroyed lesser species. Fossils and archaeological evidence reveal more than just survival. Neanderthals were toolmakers of remarkable skill, Stone axes, scrapers, and spears with meticulously sharpened points allowed them to hunt mammoths, deer, and other Ice Age beasts with precision. But their intelligence went beyond tools. Sites across Europe show signs of symbolic behavior. Burial rituals where bodies were carefully placed and occasionally accompanied by flowers or pigments, a practice suggesting not only awareness of death, but an early form of culture and empathy. Some caves even reveal pigment patterns on stones, raising the possibility that Neanderthals engaged in forms of art or communication, a glimpse into minds capable of abstract thought. Yet, despite these achievements, they remained relatively isolated, their innovations slowly evolving within small groups rather than spreading widely. This isolation became critical when Homo sapiens entered Europe. The newcomers brought not only larger social networks, but also advanced hunting techniques and the ability to coordinate across vast groups. Initial encounters may have involved cooperation, exchange, or even interbreeding, as genetic evidence confirms, but competition was inevitable. Neanderthals, powerful yet outnumbered and less adaptable, faced mounting pressure from environmental changes, scarcity of prey, and the expanding Homo sapiens. And yet questions remain. How much of Neanderthal knowledge, art, and genetics survived through these interactions? How did their way of life influence early sapiens culture? These are mysteries still being unraveled through excavation, DNA analysis, and careful study of the caves and tools they left behind. Some scientists suggest that the Neanderthals' cautious approach to innovation and their tendency to remain in familiar territories may have limited their ability to respond to the rapid changes brought by sapiens. Others point to climate shifts, disease, and competition as decisive factors. What is clear is that Neanderthals were far more than the brutish stereotypes of old. They were intelligent, resourceful, and fully human in many ways. And while their extinction marks the end of their species, it is also a beginning. Every Homo sapiens today carries traces of their legacy in DNA, in traits, and in the understanding that survival depends not only on strength, but on adaptability, creativity, and cooperation. What lessons did Homo sapiens learn from Neanderthals, consciously or unconsciously, that shaped the future of our species? And most importantly, what hidden truths about these ancient humans are still buried waiting to be discovered? That I will reveal in the next part.